Welcome to the Queen Divas, Queens of Fitness podcast. Join your hosts, three-time WBFF world champions and WBFF royalty, Alicia Gowans and Stephanie Ayala McHugh, as we explore all things female health, training, competing, mindset, and living the fitness life every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's podcast episode with my beautiful co-host, Stephanie Ayala McHugh.
Oh, hello, everyone. Hello.
We wanted to talk about, and anyone actually following my social media would have seen that I actually did a post on this morning, because it has been a topic that has come up. And I know Steph deals with very similar sort of, audience demographic and same similar issues, same but different, right? Across the globe, but all women have the same issues, where we're going to be discussing this topic and this concept where your ideal body weight may not be what you think it is for the shape and the physique that you want. So what do we mean by that? We mean that shrinking only in size and only focusing about being this smaller version of yourself is not going to elicit the shape and the, as much as I hate this word, tone that most women are looking for. So
say what, Alicia? Are you telling me I can't just lose weight and look the best way ever and the way I visualize myself, 5 years from now?
You'll probably know this too, Steph. Like, how many times do you get the conversation with women where they're like, I'm disappointed that the scale didn't move down, or I'm happy the scale moved down, but oh my God, why don't my glutes and hemis grow? Well, we can't do that in a massive
different approach and mentality. Yeah. I think that mindset on numbers, which is what we really want to hone in on today, is understanding what a metric and number does for you, and that it shouldn't own you. It shouldn't dictate your progress, of course, that you've achieved already, or if or not you are where you want to be, because most of the time we can look in the mirror and kind of know.
And look, for most women, the commonality that we get, and this is, we're speaking to an audience here that is mixed. We've got a lot of competitors and athletes and people that have been lifting for quite some time and probably have a little bit more of an understanding about the fact that the scale is going to change over time. Probably still have hang-ups on it, though, if they're honest with themselves and us and their coaches, year in, year out, when it comes time to actually grow. And then we've also got this other segment of, listeners that are new to this, perhaps new to even our sport, or just new to lifting in general. And the concept of being toned and having this shape that they, envision in their mind as being firm and shapely and muscular, but without being an Arnie level of mass, which guess what, women, we're not ever going to look that way anyway, not on our best day. But this is the vision they have in their mind. And then when they're doing this process where they're just thinking, cut weight, get, small, they get there and they're like, wow, okay, well, that isn't actually what I was thinking it was going to be. 9 times out of 10, if I haven't built the mass first, I'm going to be jiggly. I'm going to be soft. I'm going to
very much so,
even though I don't have much weight on me, right? So
you're not happy.
Exactly.
You're not happy with how you look.
I guess one of the biggest things we're going to talk about is the fact that, the benefit of building muscle, and at all ages, and in particular, especially as you start to age and get sort of in that, 40 plus demographic, you should never stop focusing on building muscle, and you should never stop focusing on being the strongest version of yourself. And guess what? When we do that, you are going to have that shape you want. You're going to build that physique you're proud of, and you're going to feel, so much more, happy with the final destination, should you then go down the route of dropping some body fat, because you're going to have firmness and shape, and you'll be filled out and not just some big rib cage mess. So I guess this
or the skinny fat, you guys, because I see this all the time. Like, they are just dieting year round, and they are the cardio bunny. And you know what? They'll throw in resistance training because they hear the whole rap, right? Here and there. But they're doing just so much on the aspect of dropping, always having to lose.
So and under-fueling, overtraining, running to try to just hit
Yeah,
this
I guess to just
scale
burn
weight.
amount of calories, right?
Correct.
But you know what I
So,
noticed the most, Alicia, which you nailed it there with just kind of saying it's just the misunderstanding of what is to come or what is
yeah,
really the future or what's that number going to look like. I think that
yeah,
that right there is it's so different per individual because I can have somebody that weighs 130 pounds, which would be what 65 kilos, and look well, just oh my God, night and day from a person next to them that weighs the same exact weight, has more lean muscle tissue, right? The other person may look actually fat. And I'm not even putting
yeah,
that this
no,
number out there
100%.
is
It's
fat in
100%.
any means, okay? It's just that they could look with higher body fat levels,
Yeah.
you're going to feel that that number is just like, oh my God, once I get to 120, let's just putting that. So if that was the case to 60 kilos, let's just say you dropped 5 kilos and you're going to expect that those are the 5 or 10 kilos, you know, that you needed to lose to look your ideal weight. What if the person next to you is the same weight, but that's actually how you want to look,
More mass.
right? With more mass.
Correct.
And we don't realize that the person next to us, or maybe that idol, that role model we look up to is really actually holding on to a lot more in their muscle mass, which reflects in their weight, but we don't understand that, right? Because we just keep on looking at as black and white. And I feel like
it's
that
that
misconception of weight.
dichotomy, right? Where everyone simply, thinks that weight loss is where it's at, that it's this number on the scale is the only thing or the only metric or the only measure of success towards their ideal physique. But the reality is peeling back the layers is not going to reveal anything other than what you've spent time to build previously, right?
The foundation, right?
So
Like what we have as our primary
exactly.
building foundation.
Exactly. So when it comes to health and fitness, this primary indicator of weight as a measure of progress is like one of the most skewed things that I see. And it's definitely always the topic of conversation with any woman once a calorie raise happens or once, they've got, bowels that haven't moved properly, which we've covered off extensively in our poo segment. And they're holding a little bit more that week. And then it's automatically then that conversation to themselves that they're failing, they're not getting
progressing.
they're not progressing. Which is just crazy because the number on the scale is not the best indicator at all. It is like one small metric, yes, but it might be what you think. And so, look, let's firstly, I think, Steph, let's talk about body composition because this is probably the thing that people just don't understand, right? So body composition is referring to the proportion of fat, muscle, and bone in your body, right? So it is the fat-free mass that we want to really be focused on. And if we're going to be looking at a number, that is always the number where I'm like, team, let's keep analyzing this. So when we're looking at, scale increase, we want to be seeing that particular segment of the whole number going up. In an off season, you're going to proportionately have a little bit of fat mass, and you need that, in fact, to be able to grow that fat-free, quality tissue. However, if you are only focused on keeping that number on the scale as small as possible, what do you
you're not going to grow.
What do you think is going to happen? You're not going to be growing the fat.
You'll stay the same.
You'll probably be breaking it down, right? A person with a higher percentage of muscle mass and a lower percentage of body fat will always have a much more conditioned, much more desirable body composition and overall in much better shape. And there is not much you can do about it. They're going to have the lines. So when they're coming into stage, they're going to have the lines and the striations and the cuts and they're going to have that because they actually have that density of muscle underneath whatever it is that they started with, layering it.
The beautiful thing about having more muscle mass onto your frame is also the fact that you don't have to diet down as drastically or to have to drop your body fat levels to a level that is maybe a little more strenuous on your body or obviously a little harder to achieve, because guess what? As you actually have more muscle bellies on your frame, you're going to be able to pop them out as you start dieting slightly down in condition versus maybe another individual that has less muscle on their frame. They're going to diet down and still look quite soft. They're going to look a little mushy, look a little watery, and still be like, well, why don't I have a 6-pack? And look, I'm totally relatable on that end. I think I've said this on this podcast before. My first show, I remember looking for my abs and just kept looking for them. And I dieted down like to the gill. I mean, I was really, really low in body fat, but I never had really prioritized building up my ab wall and actually having more muscle density on my core, which then really defeated my whole purpose of looking for abs, because I probably would have had to drop to a very even more unhealthily level of body fat that I already was at, just to be able to get them to pop out. And that would have just been kind of honestly ridiculous, because I was pretty low. I was already under my double digits. I was already in single digits. So that's just stupid. So trying to think of, why am I dieting and not seeing the frame or the muscle or the toned, like Ali said, look that I'm looking for? It probably comes down to the fact that you just do not have sufficient enough underneath your, obviously layers of fats.
Absolutely. And, look, how many times have we had girls come to stage even? Let's use this actually as an example. And they'll be standing on stage with, counterparts and peers. And, the right girl that's going to win the show is standing there because she has the right level of muscle mass, which has brought the best level of condition to the stage and overall beauty. She's ticking all those boxes, right? And I can guarantee you, 9 times out of 10, the first thing that women take away from that journey, that day, that experience when they don't win is, I wasn't lean enough. That's the first conversation they always throw up is, I just wasn't lean enough. I didn't come in lean enough. I was still carrying too much body fat. And my argument for most people is always going to be this. I think you just weren't muscly enough.
Yes.
I think you had the foundation. I don't think you were as developed. I think it's evident to see that she spent a few more years in the gym than you. She clearly has a proper strategic off season, and she grows both her calories and her ass at the same freaking time. And then when she comes in, she looks like she does, and she nails all the boxes, right? She ticks all the boxes. Yes. So there might be a few things to play with in here too, which, we will talk about in composition, where genetics, they are not going to be something that will detract you from getting a result you want. It's time, effort, consistency that will get you there. Absolutely. But, they might just be Brazilian.
And they might be, and
more butt.
They grow crazy glutes, right? And we have
exactly.
I've got some athletes. I've got some clients that every time I see their information, I'm like, how the heck are you getting these results?
I'm always like,
fast?
I think in my next life, please,
hey, I'm Latina.
I wouldn't mind just, you just give me a sliver, just a quarter, just a freaking quarter. I'd be happy with a quarter Brazilian right now, right? Just give me a quarter in each glute and I will rock up and turn up. But my point being that, don't always look at this and go, I've got to cut more food and I've got to pound the pavement. I've got to go do more cardio and I've got to restrict. I've got to starve myself and I've got to out-train this. Because what I would argue is, if you are not yet happy and everything's not moving in the direction you want, reverse a little, recomp, and focus on that fat-free mass component of the total scale weight for composition and grow the heck out of it, guys. Like, you should not want to come in at the same stage weight, for anyone that's listening to this as a competitor, as you did the year before or the stage before, because then that's retarded. You're just not progressing. You're not progressing, you're not changing. You should also, as someone, losing weight that's actively working on building shape, respect the fact that each year, year in, year out, if you're doing the right thing in the gym and you're actually progressing and you're actually, working hard, you're going to increasingly weigh a little more. And that's not a bad thing, because interestingly enough, with the fact that, body fat, has anyone, listening to this, if you haven't already, maybe go Google and have a look at it. You can actually do this. And I know we did this at university. They give you these like gobby glue, I
really please do this, y'all.
Yeah, it's a great exercise. And if you ever get the chance to physically hold them, it will blow your mind. And they give you, a 5 kilo of adipose tissue and a 5 kilo of lean muscle.
The size of the adipose tissue is fucking mind-blowing.
Oh my God, right? Like quite substantial.
It takes up this much space versus just a little small, if you were to visually see it, right? Like you could still see how little, and dense that muscle can weigh, and just weigh heavily.
100%. And I can remember that exercise for me at university was that profound moment of going, wow, scales don't fucking matter, yo. Like at all. Yes, I shouldn't say that actually. They do to a degree, but where I'm coming from. Like, I'm not going to get hung up on that. Right?
Yeah, it's a tool.
Correct. So, and as we also know, relying solely on the scale as a metric can be substantially, or a measure of progress only, can be substantially problematic. You know, this is where we start getting issues with body image, unhealthy habits, extreme dieting, over-exercising, throwing the baby out with the bathwater because you've got bowel movement that hasn't moved and you think, or a cycle about to come. And so therefore we're up a little bit and you think, I need to cut calories and I need to go and exercise more, right? Exactly. Like it's just this perpetual hamster wheel where you're focusing on things.
Yeah, I think that weight is also another reminder that this is just a perspective for anyone listening that I really want you to look in and think of just a small little comparison here that I'm going to make. And I'm going to put myself as the example. And I've honestly had to go through so many builds, so many, you know, fat loss phases because we've been in competition, but I've also had to stay in maintenance for quite a while. Yeah. So it depends on where you're at in your journey. If you still have lean muscle to build, meaning it's the beginning of your journey, then you have to go through those phases. You've got to go through the surplus. You've got to go through some fat loss phases. It doesn't matter if you don't have something coming up. You don't want to just stay in a surplus years on end. You want to kind of go through some phases where, yes, long periods of time, you know, at least 6 to 9 months minimum of a surplus. If you haven't gone through a surplus, I would recommend someone to go through at least a minimum of a year if they can, and then maybe start doing somewhat of a descent and try to do a fat loss phase, then reverse out like Ali had said, and continue doing those phases a few times. And that's going to look like what, like a 5-year plan. I'm being realistic here. You do this and you go on in and you actually do this years on end. And let's say 5 years from now, you're actually in a place where you're like, wow, I want to maintain. I really don't want to be going through this up and down yo-yoing. And it's not yo-yoing. It's just these phases that might make you feel uncomfortable. And you'll get to a place where maintenance is then your life. And what about that weight that you just kept, you know, getting fluctuated or getting,
it's probably really wildly different to what you initially started with your intent in your mind as to what that should look like, right? So let me actually paint a picture for you all. I'm currently weighing right now what I did when I first started. Actually, no, I'm weighing right now what I did when I got my final positive result on my pregnancy, right? And this is after a year-long battle of IVF. I was barely lifting because I'd had that fall in Westfield and done a number on my back again. We were in and out of discussions around whether or not to have surgery. Like it was a real journey, right? So my entire composition had changed. And so I'm literally the same weight that I was at the start of the pregnancy now. My whole shape looks entirely different, everyone, like entirely different. So I'm also anticipating I'm going to put on potentially a little more before I start a final cut through to stage, okay? And my goal with that is the purpose of bringing to that stage, when I get back on it, some of the lost size that were a result of the composition change in me during that journey. Now, if I was only solely focused on scales and weight, I would be seeing this as a potential backward step, even because when I had actually fallen pregnant, I was still sitting at that point a little higher than my normal off season, simply because I had to change composition in order to fall, right? So again, throwing it out there, if I was so worried or hung up only on the scale weight and thinking about shrinking myself and staying small, I would be leaving on the table lost gains, right? 100% would. I would never be able to bring anything competitive to that world stage in this time frame that I've had, if that's the way that I looked at it. So instead, what have I been focusing on? Well, big time focusing on that fat-free mass, big time focusing on the performance I have in the gym, 100% analyzing data week in, week out about my metrics in my lifting, where my progressive loading is. Am I actually loading more on the plates? As I recovered post-show through that first recovery phase in that sort of, 8 to 10 weeks, I was looking for strength gains and I was focused only on building strength. And then beyond that phase and into this now block that I'm in, which is an actual prep phase, all I'm focused on is ticking boxes of progressive loading every single week. And you know what? The scales are going to move up with that. You're going to have post-inflammatory responses to training, physiological adaptations from training, all the things you actually want. Plus I'm eating more food and I'm fueling those sessions and my carbs have gone right up. So there's that. So my
Oh,
scale's
wow.
doing a
Yeah.
few things from a few different reasons, none of which I'm attached to, but everything I'm loving is seeing that my calipers, which assess my fat-free mass, will give me
Your
a
muscle.
broad line understanding of where I'm sitting, has shown me that I'm at the same point that I was in my 7 points at 5 weeks from stage at Atlantic City.
Amazing.
So
Yeah.
am I worried about that weight? Fucking hell no. What I'm
Yeah.
worried
Actually,
about.
the weight excites me. If I ever
That's what I
get
was gonna
more
say.
weight,
I'm worried
I
about
really get
gaining.
excited. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
even if it's water, I don't care. Get those babies swollen. Get these legs
Exactly.
swollen. I don't care. I'm
Exactly.
like, literally get them inflamed, get them pumped. And guess what? If you just did a massive leg session, a massive one where you were like having already fatiguing sets, like you did a drop set, triple drop set, whatever you did, and it caused, again, such volume tear down on your muscles, you are going to literally have inflammation, and you're going to probably go up in the scale when you check in, and you're going to kind of freak out like, whoa, what happened? Am I gaining fat? But in reality, you've really honestly just gained a little more water into the muscles, and that is totally fine. Or maybe the fact that you lacked some sleep, because that happens to me. If I had a massive session and then I lacked sleep that night, it's like a double whammy. It's like two things getting dumped in versus me just getting massively inflamed from my workout.
This is also something that I know we've touched on previously in other episodes too, Steph, which, you know, I'm hoping people listening to this that are coming into some of their shows or even just starting their prep to a stage this year, take this away, is that having data is great and you want it for trend analysis, but don't get married to it, right? These are numbers also we talk about where I'm like, don't expect the same process from season to season. If you're growing, it's not going to be the same. And if you are, you know, building more metabolic tissue, then your caloric intake will be higher, your needs will be higher, you'll come in on higher calories if you've actually reversed properly.
Which is beautiful.
Yeah, you'll come in at
Such
a
a beautiful
weight.
like result.
So, yeah. And so it's like,
love seeing this.
Stop telling me that you should weigh this because last time you weighed this at this point, you shouldn't.
I literally want to shake
that,
somebody's
we're
head.
going backwards,
Yes.
and I will blow my brains out because we literally didn't achieve anything. Do you know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
So again, it's not about getting to this smallest version of yourself that has absolutely no, you know, quality development there. It's about actually focusing on the things that bring the development. So this for me, segues into the most important thing that you can ever do in your life. And I think everyone should do it at every aspect of life, and especially as you're getting older, because that's when we need it most, because our protein needs are so much higher, which means we will break down our muscle mass and move into osteopenia if we do not look after the development of our muscle. Is the benefits of building muscle, people, which is more than body fat.
I can't stress this enough because this is a topic that I mean, I know it's floating around. I mean, high protein, you know, eat more protein. But see, the thing is that we don't realize the longevity that we get from eating sufficient protein, number one, then to building muscle and actually having that approach and how that's going to sustain our life and build us up, and how we're talking about these layerings of foundation, building your foundation. The primary kicker here, besides actually trying to build muscle, what's the number one key source? It's going to be your protein. And we've talked about recovery. We've talked about, of course, other ways that you can try to, you know, increase maybe your training efforts, intensities. But really another thing here that Ali is really hitting too is the building muscle approach is also no attachment to weight, but also building muscle needs to also be with more intention. So the more intentful you are with each lift, you're also going to actually maximize all of your efforts. So instead of just kind of going through it, like she was really talking about the progressing tracking. I find that that's the biggest tool across anyone, no matter who you are. If you don't know what you're lifting and what your capacity of lifting is for that exercise, are you really challenging yourself? And are you really going to be, you know, growing, to be honest? Probably not.
And I mean, how many times, Steph, have you seen, you know, with certain athletes or even clients, and they're like, you know what you've programmed, and you know that if they're actually executing that program with intensity, with the fueling structure, and they're hitting it with, you know, a level of compliance and adherence, at least at an 80-90%, their progress should be here, right? And then they're checking in with you and it's like way down here, and you're kind of going, okay, we've self-rated that we're, you know, a 9 out of 10 on all compliance, and or even a meticulous 10 out of 10, and yet We're just not getting the traction. And so for me, my thing always comes back to send me videos. I need to see lifts because I need to see, are you applying any intensity at all? Because if we're not taking something to that level and that proximity to failure, and then in some cases through to actual failure, we're just leaving gains on the table, right?
Which leads me to that weight staying maybe the same. So if you aren't seeing those trickles of maybe spikes, and I'm not saying just gradually a risk going up, the weight, again, going back to it not tying to something, if you're putting the efforts and your weight staying the same, it's cool, guys, it's fine. But maybe at some point, if it isn't fluctuating, assess your intensity in your training. Look into, you know, maybe your tracking of your progressive overload. And another thing here, going into not getting tied into the scale and it not owning you, the one thing that I find that is the most essential tracking tool, and I think everyone should do this no matter where they're at in their journey, even if we loathe the journey we're on or the phase that we're in, is to take your photos. I can't stress this enough, because if you don't take photos, you can still weigh the same exact. So going back into body composition, maybe a year later, you were just like, wow, let me go ahead and compare these photos. Same weight. So you kind of start feeling a little, you know, bad about yourself and bad about your progress. But then you go back and reflect and you see, wow, a year ago, I weighed the same, but I look massively different. I have more muscle. I have more glutes. I have, you know, some more X frame on my back. Like I've got some action going on in my quads. Like before you didn't have that. And muscle weighs more than fat. It's not necessarily weighs on the aspect of actually weighing more, guys, but it looks so much more denser. Okay. So it's going to look like it weighs more on the scale, when in reality, it looks 10 times better, 100 times better.
It takes up less space. So it weighs, technically it's dense, it's more dense, weighs
same
more,
weight, but looks so much
space. So therefore it will be smaller, you know? And look, it's completely essential for overall physical health, right? As we age, as we discussed already, you naturally lose muscle mass. That starts to decline sort of, you know, mid-30s, rapidly starts to be dropped sort of 40s and onwards if you are not executing it. Like if you're not activating it, using it, if you're not using it, you're losing it, people. So it leads to a decline in strength, in mobility, and you know, as you age in independence, you know what I mean? Like you start actually having that risk of low bone mineral density, fall over, break a hip, and the stats on that are just scary. Like the actual mortality rate after you break one of those as an elderly person is really high. It's really cool. You know, that's why I say that everyone should be focused on getting stronger and actually adding mass. So we're not talking about a subtraction on a scale. We're talking about adding mass. Now, for some people, that adding of mass will mean a substantial subtraction on scales, but not always. And this was what led me to have this conversation, both in my own social media, but then us talking about it, was that I see that conversation frequently. And I've had it raised a few times this week with a few clients where they're just substantially hyper-focused on lack of shape, but they refuse to actually focus on intensity in the gym and fueling adequately to support and sustain building of muscle, right? So it's that double-edged sword. You just can't keep cutting away and expect to have the shape you want. You've got to build the shape first, then take the layers off to reveal it later. And it takes time, people. This doesn't happen fast.
No, it goes through phases. Like I was explaining, you know, you have to understand, how long have I been in this phase? Ask yourself this question. If you've honestly been dieting down for longer than 6 months, like ask yourself, if I've already hit rock bottom, I haven't really got any more progress, assess what you're actually doing, reverse out, go through a maintenance and then into a surplus. And then I don't like going from a reverse straight into a surplus. I find that a lot of people get really sloppy really quickly. So I like to really kind of encourage to get into a reverse if you come out of a deficit or from a dieting phase into a maintenance phase. So from the reverse, get to a maintenance point and really find, again, what are those maintenance calories? What's your maintenance output? You know, your daily needs. What's those requirements for your lifestyle? And then try to start going into that surplus, and don't just skyrocket it and think of like, oh, I'm not just going to, you know, eat all the food in the world and then start making muscle and building it. I think that's also a misconception that people kind of, you know, go on the deep end and start just stacking a whole bunch of donuts and Rice Krispies and think like, I'm building glutes because I'm hitting glutes today. And it's like, it doesn't work that way, you know, not 100%. You want to be in a surplus.
Well, but you definitely, as long as you're actually lifting lifting with intensity too, right? Which I think I find most people don't.
Ali, though, how many people do you truly know that actually fatigue and go to failure?
Not many. Unfortunately,
my point being,
literally just having this conversation last week. And so, you know, that's why I ask for videos from clients, and I ask for polar strap data to actually check where calories are being burned, because I just don't.
Yes.
Traction, if the rubber's not meeting the road, there's no traction. So where's the traction point failing us, right? But in addition to building this mass, right, this is the stuff that we're talking about also that improves your bone density. So in a dieting phase or a chronic dieting phase, or if you're doing repetitive dieting year in, year out for these shows, the more muscle mass you have, the actual, you know, the greater protective nature you get while you're dieting, because dieting will strip the hell out of this stuff, guys. And so, you know, you really do want to have a decent amount of muscle before you go pulling these layers of fat off. Why is it also important? Well, because strength training puts stress on, you know, on your bones themselves. So that's actually a part of what stimulates them to become denser. It's especially important for women because we are super, super, super susceptible to osteoporosis. And that is the condition that, for anyone listening to this that doesn't know, creates weak and brittle bones. And that's the stuff that can create massive issues for you as you age. Nice. You know, I think building muscle also boosts your metabolism because, as we talked about, it's a highly metabolic tissue. And it is more metabolically active than fat tissue, meaning that you will burn calories at rest. So the more that you have of this dense, beautiful tissue, the better your position is going to be from a conditioning point of view and overall body fat composition point of view.
You ever wonder why someone can eat maybe more food and you're like, well, how do they stay?
Bloody men.
Quite often, it's not probably because they built up a more lean muscle tissue on their body to start with. Exactly. Your metabolic rate is higher as well. It's just the way you actually approach your day to day. I feel like this is another missing key here, is that we just kind of assume that maybe what we're already doing is enough or not enough, kind of, you know what I mean, counter depending on what end of the spectrum you are here, but trying to make sure you are not doing too much or not enough is kind of, again, assessing yourself for your body composition to truly change, because you shouldn't be maybe super sedentary and then wondering, well, what if my stepping into the gym 30 minutes isn't sufficient? You probably need to be expending a little bit more in that gym. So please analyze, like Ali has said, your expenditure, whether that's just step counting, or just tracking with a calorie, tracker for, of course, your expenditure, but definitely trying to keep in a little more awareness, right, over what your day-to-day metric is, and not just weight metric as far as kind of your body mass, your water intake,
and not getting attached to a specific scale weight, because it's super important that we actually look at the fact that creating this metabolic tissue is actually going to probably have that scale weight look completely different. And look, let's just remove away from the purely aesthetic benefit here of building mass, because we've talked a little bit about the bones and why that's important, but man, it has so many other benefits. It ranges from, prevention of chronic disease, prevention of heart disease, reduction of, potential risk of diabetes. It improves your insulin sensitivity. It's important for managing blood sugar levels, but it is a massive deal for most people when it comes to mental health. And I'm super responsive and super sensitive to that benefit. And I literally will train for a good mental state. So, if you are suffering from anxiety, if you are suffering from mental health issues, instead of thinking about and pulling yourself down about what you weigh, instead be looking at mastering what you're doing in the gym, finding the exercise that you love, really starting to, throw yourself into this, complete endorphin releasing, process that will improve that state for you. I think that that's just something that we don't talk about enough. It tends to be just that it's just aesthetic, but there's so much more to it. So, I think
that's antidepressant. I mean, you nailed it.
Getting stronger. They're the keys, right? So let's talk about getting small. Let's talk about shrinking and more about actually building and getting
And
stronger.
being stronger,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
And that's what our talks should be about. And honestly, actually, the
yeah,
more we talk about this,
100%.
Ali, it's like all we ever really chat about is how much stronger we are or how much better, we're feeling with
That's
more
true.
food. Can
It's
I eat more
true.
carbs now? And like, I think when you're entering and welcoming, entering these new phases, you're going to be welcoming, some unknown territory for yourself, but you embrace it, really, really take it and try to just figure things out along the way. Don't try to know everything and say that doesn't work for me. I blow up and get inflamed if I eat more carbs. But really, honestly, do you? Because it's probably mental. I swear, I see this all the time where I'm like, it's all in your head.
100%.
I know keto worked for you in the past and that's how you lost weight, but that's not really the only answer for you building muscle. And if you're in a keto approach right now, I'm not putting any keto people down, but I will say these are the ones that struggle building the most when it comes to lean muscle tissue, because you don't have sufficient carbohydrates into your diet. So making sure you kind of maybe reverse even from a keto approach, unless you are celiac and you're needing to be with that approach in your nutrition, but it's very rare and it's actually quite lower, the people that have to be really, really approaching with no carbs approach, so yeah, it's still out there, and I just kind of have to put that out there because I see it so much. Don't try to label a phase as like that is demonized, like, oh, I don't want to gain weight, I don't want to gain body fat. That's kind of what they always talk about, right? Like, just welcome it, try it out. Try to see, oh my God, it's amazing how you feel. You start freaking actually feeling like a woman, feeling so much better. Because when we're dieting all the time, we're freaking psycho bitches.
Oh, it's so good. So, look, I guess we've talked about the fact that the scale itself is not the determining factor of progress. And in fact, the body you ideally want will probably weigh substantially different to what you initially thought. We also talked about the fact that focusing on strength and building mass are the only real ways to achieve that result you want. And it should be less about the scale. But looking at that, then what practical, tips do you have, Steph, for people to actually incorporate strength training into their fitness routine if they're not already, and or if they are already? How do you talk to your clients about making it more about the strength and less about the scale?
It always ties down to your efforts and intention, like I was referring to, and knowing what is your max effort. And I find that most of the common denominator across, results and progress, you nailed it too, is actually saying, I don't see the results in their progress pictures. And I'm like, they're doing all the things, they're ticking it off. So you already know it's usually going to come down to maybe technique, form, right? Some patterns that are maybe off for them. And also the load may be heavy, but maybe too heavy. So it's not assessing of just progressing in just strength and weight all the time. So this is something that might kind of feel like contradictory here and saying, well, we want you to focus on strength and we want you to get stronger, but strength looks so different per individual and per movement. So trying to only get heavier on a hip thrust may lose the engagement of your actual glutes. You may start getting very hip strength dominant, where you're actually focusing on other areas like your hamstrings start overloading, just putting that as an example, and not really contracting with your glutes, rather than you're actually reducing the weight, focusing on that form and actually contracting and fatiguing the muscles in areas with more isometric holds, whether if that's variations of drop sets, maybe going to failure. And that alone is going to stimulate the muscle tissue to really break down and grow so much more. So I really kind of analyze their program, kind of, again, their intention and effort behind every movement, and trying to really give them more tools, of how to be able to progress amongst these maybe thresholds that they've already hit. Like, I'm like, I can't go heavier than this amount of hip thrusting. It's not the strength on that end. We've got to create different tension, obviously overload that muscle in a different way. We got to, activate different fibers, and sometimes it goes with less weight. So if you're listening to this and you're kind of struggling with hitting a PR anymore, and you've kind of hit that high, 2, 3, 4 rep PR, and you're just like not really able to do anymore, reduce that weight and start hitting PRs for 8 reps, 6 to 8 reps. I think that that's just a great
Increase
approach for you to,
volume
the volume
to
of
be able
it.
to increase your reps in a shorter rep range later.
Correct.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and that's just a method for anyone listening, that if you're already struggling with, you keep trying to do 4 reps or under, 2 to 4, doubles, singles. I mean, that is tough work. And if you're not a power lifter, and I don't know if powerlifters are listening to this right now, it's not the case, like it's not our focus here. Are you trying to be a power lifter? Then yes, you've got to train that way and start hitting some singles and some doubles and trying to test your, obviously 1 rep max. But if you're not entering a powerlifting competition, we need to focus on actual contraction of the muscle, good stimulation, overloading the muscles correctly, not just through the joint movement, which normally happens a lot when you're squatting a lot of weight, deadlifting a lot of weights, or thrusting a lot of weight. It kind of just becomes something rapidly done through the joints and not really, again, the load onto the muscles. So again, focusing on maybe a little more volume work, and then reducing maybe the amount of frequency of training. Because I feel, again, we've had this topic.
This is actually key to this, right? It's about getting, I guess, a little bit more purpose around how you're entering the gym, and remembering that, look, to build muscle, there has to be a form of resistance. So that form of resistance can come either via, actual weightlifting, or even there are really great body weight exercises that can take you forms of resistance if you're just starting out. So don't feel like that's going to prevent you from having access to, resistance based.
Tell me your body weight won't burn those Bulgarian split squats and not make you cry and curse and
pull-ups and push-ups and all the variations of both. Look, and I think finding what works best for you. Are you someone that likes to be inside of, machine-based structures, so you don't have to focus on the internal level of control? Are you someone that's an advanced trainee and you're working with free weights? Do you, are you a CrossFit junkie? Do you love your kettlebells? Like, whatever it is, just find your jam and then throw yourself into that process with, and I would strongly suggest to start with, maybe a workout partner or your actual partner, or joining a fitness group at first, getting a personal trainer. So you have someone to spot you, support you, help you load, and also correct form, right? Because if you are just starting out, then I think it's really important to make sure that you've actually got the proper mechanics and the proper, patterns of movement safely executing.
Can you say that again for the people in the back? Because I find that people are just starting to do all of this, and then they just really jump into doing programs online. I'm like, well, what are you doing though? You still haven't even learned how to properly squat, and you still haven't learned how to properly actually activate muscles that should be activated right now. You have a horrible back, horrible form, like all these things that you may think that looks right. And if you're not recording yourself, just leaving this last little note here for all of you, because recording your actual form is just an enlightening way for you to see what you thought you were doing right.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not maybe right. And it may feel right, but it's not right when you watch it and you're like, I thought I was going far enough, or I thought I was going so much slower, when in reality, you might have been swinging, being all over the place. So you need to kind of really analyze your form, your technique. If you haven't started off with a trainer, you have to. Like this was, Ali and I don't think we ever stepped on a floor, right, without being trained by a trainer before we went into our profession of learning how to train others. So it's really important to get yourself someone in person. If you haven't already worked with somebody in person, do that. And I promise you, your sessions will, honestly blow up through the roof, because now you're going to activate the right things. You're going to feel much better. You're going to prevent less injury. And also, if you already work with the trainer, maybe now trying to increase that intensity with only when the trainer is there watching, so you feel safe. I find that that's another way that we, like you said, a buddy, a little partner, maybe motivation. It always kind of hypes you up when somebody's there yelling at you and telling you to go an extra rep. You got more in your tank. So it's helpful, definitely. Like I know when I train with Ali, we have great sessions. We push each other. So find someone that doesn't bring down your energy. If you're someone already, like I know there's some people I can't train with because I'm training them the whole time versus it's actually a training session that, you know, you have a good flow, a good push, and you're motivated, and they're actually at the same level and intensity as you. So making sure that if you are someone that is maybe looking for partners, don't look for a partner that's weaker and that you're the stronger one. Look for the stronger partner and the person that scares you and makes you actually think, damn, I'm about to like get anxiety over training. And I know I get that sometimes. Like when I trained with Daniel and Bailey, I was like kind of getting a little anxiety.
Yeah, I reckon I would have had
I was
anxiety
like,
about that
oh
too.
crap, this woman knows how to lift. And not only that, she lifts heavy.
Yeah, I would have had anxiety too.
Oh
Like,
man,
oh my
but
God.
exciting. And you know what? That was a session of a lifetime because again, she was on a different level. I was trying to match that level of effort and that level
It
of
pushes you,
intensity.
right?
And
100%.
it pushes the heck out of you. So
100%.
make sure you look for somebody better than you, if not at the same
Agree.
level.
Totally agree. And I think like probably the biggest thing that I would say, you know, from a tip point of view is to actually sit down and analyze the phase you're moving into, what it is that you're trying to get out of it, so the objective of it, and then setting goals and targets for yourself. Like, okay, in this block, I am going to master the Romanian deadlift. I am going to, by the end of this, whether it's an 8-week, 10-week, 12-week phase, even if you're going through a proper progressively loaded periodized program, it could be 12 weeks. I'm going to, by the end of it, not only have, you know, a consistent, you know, set up a consistent form at any weight. I'm going to be lifting and moving the bar, you know, effectively, efficiently, and, you know, with great technique. And then I'm going to also be hitting progressively bigger lifts, right? Like that. And that's a 12-week process. That's not going to happen in 2 weeks. It's not going to happen in your first session. So set those targets, right? And then week to week, when you know what you've lifted the week before, like it's not uncommon for me if I need to auto regulate to go, well, today I'm not going to increase the load at all, but I'm actually going to lift more reps at this weight from last week before I progress the load next week. So it can look different to you. But again, every time I walk into the gym, I'm setting mini goals for that session. I'm so engaged. I'm so active in that process, and I'm so motivated in that actual, you know, session itself to progress on the last, that I don't feel like I need random variety, crazy levels of junk volume, stupid exercises that have no fucking sense whatsoever to be in a program in the first place, but because some influencer did it, it looked cool. And I also don't need to turn around and be saying every 4 weeks, I need a new program, I'm getting bored. Well, no, you're not bored. You're just not even engaged. You're just not even focused. You have zero level of attention to your actual session, and you are not working hard enough. Sorry, go away, come back when you actually learn how to fail. Like, you know what I mean?
Facts.
That's 100% facts. To anyone listening to this, if you know, hey, shit, that's me, holy crap, don't be sheepish about it. Own it and go, yep, far out. I really do that. I've probably left some big gains on the table because I've changed something to shock my muscles, which, by the way, people, is fucking bullshit. There is no such thing. You've failed to reach your actual physiological adaptative process because you've cut yourself short and shortchanged yourself because you need variety. That's the most retarded thing I've ever heard.
I think there's so much out there that's just such BS. And I mean, the variety thing, I can kind of understand with some people because you want to do some different movement, but not taking out the basics. That is never
correct,
right? Like if you were going to do some fun little movement and maybe add it in for some agility or, you know, some explosiveness, cool. But do not take out your squats. Your
have your base foundation of what you're trying to achieve, and then but this is where I always say, find something you're passionate about and have it as part of your mix. So rather than just going willy-nilly doing crazy, stupid stuff, you just literally do the basics, own them well, have proper, you know, sort of smart exercise selection for your, you know, personal goals and maybe your category requirements, and then throw in something fun. If you need something for fun, go do something for fun. That's on top of what you're doing.
Fun. That's 100%. If you need something extra, and I think that some people do, you know, activity wise, they just want to go be out and about, do it on your active recovery day. Do you see if it's actually impeding maybe your training program? If it is, then maybe assess with your coach. Hey, I really enjoy, you know, doing a triathlon. I don't know if you're one of those. I have some clients that are crazy like that, but then, you know, you have maybe, I don't know, a want to go out and do a 5K or just yoga. Like yoga is something I know Ali does. So you'd be able to incorporate that properly into your program.
definitely.
So there's other activities, or like some of my girls, like they love to dance. So they'll like to do dance classes. I encourage it because that's a
Me
form
too.
of activity
Me
that
too.
is going
That's
to get you
enjoyment.
active, and it definitely makes
That's
enjoyment in your life.
That's movement for fun. And I think that movement for fun is as important as movement for purpose, right? So
100%.
I'm definitely all for that. And I think the final thing and the last thing that I wanted to get home has literally just been about the fact that in order to build the muscle, and we've talked about this previously, you still need to listen to your body and you still need to rest. So this whole concept of I've got to get small, I've got to shrink, I've got to get the scales down, let's go do more is sometimes the worst thing you could possibly do. So finding that balance on what is the right level of output, what is the right focus on rest and active rest days, and then, adequately fueling your physique for
and intentionally lifting and purposely lifting, because you could be that hamster on a wheel. And if you feel like, hey, maybe they've been talking about me this whole episode, that I've been, just kind of doing the same thing, the same efforts, dieting down, snap out of this phase, get yourself to be in more of a, intention.
And I think you'll relate to this, snap out of that conversation of I've wasted time. The last time that I've just spent has been a waste because I've got nowhere. Snap out of that, because you've never wasted time. You've actually just had opportunity for growth. Exactly.
Hey, we're investing in ourselves every day.
You know you could do something better from this point forward. Pick your act up, focus on it, and do better, right? Don't blame time past. Look at everything as a learning and a growth opportunity. So, look, I wanted to say to everyone, thank you so much for listening today. And I really hope that it helped you understand that when you're looking at the physique you really want and you know what you desire from the point of view of the final finish, it may not weigh what you think. We hope you gain valuable insights into, the fact that building strength and focusing on, strength, getting stronger and getting more muscle is actually going to give you the body you want. And it may or may not weigh less than what you currently are. It may even weigh more, but you could be substantially physically different in a composition appearance point of view.
It's an amazing thing.
And look, at the end of the day, stop freaking putting all of your attachment on your self-worth on a freaking number. That's all I will say.
Detach from a number. Throw that shit away in the aspect of not using it just as one tool. Please stop weighing yourself every day. And I understand that this could be a metric and tool for others, but I find that if this isn't a thing that's happening to you now, that you're weighing yourself constantly all the time and it's messing with you, I want you to stop and do it once a week, just on your check-in day when your coach requires you to, and don't even upload or do whatever you need to do to submit your check-in, and just stop looking at the number. Do not let the number own you. Just let your coach, or if you are obviously alone right now, then stop looking at it and start looking at your performance, start looking at your output, and start looking at your pictures. Your pictures speak louder than those numbers, and especially if you're building muscle. So make sure you are analyzing and tracking, and of course, taking those pics, and along the way, throwing any type of attachment that you have with the scale out the window. And you're going to be so much happier and so much successful in this journey. We hope you guys enjoyed this episode and were able to take some notes and take some tips and see how we are able to kind of,
I hope you're
clients and
less fearful of the scale, maybe, and a little bit more understanding that, hey, to look and feel my best, I'm probably not going to weigh 20 kilos, whatever the silly number is that you have in your head, right? Like, come on, team. Let's get away from that. That's so 1990s, But anyway, thank you so much. It's been amazing. I love chatting with you as always, Steph. And for everyone listening, please share, comments and let us know how you found today's episode. And if you are in fact guilty of some of what we've talked about, give us a bit of a post in your story and let us know how, that might have been an eye-opener for you and how you might change what you're doing or how you have changed in the past. This might have been something you've left behind.
what I want to see, and any of you listeners listening, is I want to see a body recomp. I want to see you go back a year and look at that photo and look at yourself now and compare your last self to your new self and be proud of yourself and how far you've come. And if you analyze this and maybe it isn't as transparent as you'd like it to be, then start taking the notes that we gave you on this episode and start applying them and start actually putting a little bit more effort into maybe the recovery, or into maybe the training, into maybe the nutrition, whatever it may be, detaching yourself from that scale and making sure body recomp changes are happening, because that's where the real progress is made. And where honestly the longevity of your life is going to be, because if you focus on body recomp, adding more lean muscle tissue onto your body, reducing some body fat, you're going to be happy, healthier, and gosh, you're going to look bomb. So I hope everybody loved today, and I'll see you next time, Allie. I love you.
I love you too. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Queen Divas, Queens of Fitness podcast. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Queen Divas Pod, on Twitter at Queen Divas 4, and follow our hosts on Instagram, Alicia at Alicia Gowans _WBFF Pro, and Steph at Stephanie Ayala 7. See you all next week.